So I read the Hunger Games trilogy, The Battle of Zombies and Snakes, and now it's time for this one. The reason we're all here today, honestly, because if it wasn't for everybody and their mother rereading the original trilogy in order for this release, I don't think I would be here right now. To be fair, I did say in my Hunger Games video that my interest in the series has increased as I've gotten older and I've seen more discussions around it. But generally, what pushed me over the edge is just like everybody read the trilogy. So I am very excited to announce that I also am finally getting around to this book. I'm actually really excited for this because in the weeks leading up to this video, the casting of the movie has slowly been rolled out, and I'm just like, oh, I want to read this book so badly. But I had some other things on the docket, so now it is finally time. I don't know much about this book. I know it's Haymitch's story, which Haymitch is a character in the original trilogy. He's the mentor of Katniss and Peeta, and I love his character so much, so I'm very excited to learn more about him. And of course, it explains her doing the second quarter quell, which is the 50th Hunger Games, to give some context. And we know from Mockingjay that, no, not Mockingjay, we know from Catching Fire that Haymitch won these games by basically kind of like spotting a flaw in the force field surrounding the arena, so that makes him a bit of, you know, a not so typical victor, I will say. And I also know that because of the quarter quell, like the special thing is that there is 4 tributes instead of 2 per district. So that's all I know about this book. Basically all the info we got in Catching Fire about these games. So I'm very excited to read this. Also, a thing I know about this is that literally everyone I've seen read this book has been absolutely sobbing. So I'm not ready for that. We all know that Mockingjay like destroyed my soul. So if everybody is also just like sobbing at this book, I don't know how that's gonna turn out for me. You know what, I just realized The Hunger Games was a 5-star, Catching Fire a 4, Mockingjay a 5, Battle of Sunrise and Snake a 4, so by that logic, this book should also be a 5. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I am 100 pages into this book, and I honestly already have quite the collection of tabs, so things are going well. But so far, honestly, the most interesting thing about this book is honestly just seeing, like, to me personally, seeing the parallels between this Haymitch and like things that are happening now to the Haymitch we know and love in the original trilogy, or I know and love. Not everyone might love him, but I do. I think that's the most fun part for me about this book so far. But it is very much about propaganda, and I think that's very interesting as a subject matter, just like in general. So I'm really enjoying that as well. But let's just get into things, starting off with the start of the book, which is Haymitch saying that his birthday is on Weeping Day, which is that info we knew before, because I feel cheated by that. What do you mean? He was so drunk he stumbled off his stage on Weeping Day in the Hunger Games. And it's his birthday! I mean, that scene already like shows so much about him and his trauma without even knowing that it's his birthday that day as well. Yeah. We also learn that he goes out to make white liquor with Hattie Meany, who sells it in the hop, which I don't want to call it foreshadowing because this was written after the Hunger Games, but you know that white liquor is his liquor of choice later on in life. Oof. And then there's also, again, we can't call this foreshadowing because this was written after the fact, but it explained it before the fact. But there is a moment where Haymitch talks about kind of like his work with Hattie, and he says bootlegging's illegal 10 different ways, and all it would take is a new head peacekeeper, one who didn't like a stiff drink himself, to lend us in his stocks, or worse. Is that exactly what happens? I mean, not exactly, because I believe Hattie escapes from that, manages to clear up her shit before it's full crackdown, but like that quite literally happened in Catching Fire, where like a new peacekeeper comes to town and all of a sudden all of those Lex rules that were happening in District 12 are gone. And then we learn about Lenore Dove, aka Haymitch's girlfriend, aka Lucy Gray's niece? No, cousin. I'm trying to draw out the family tree. But we learn that her uncle is Clerk Carmine. It also mentions that Lenore Dove loves geese. And like, in Mockingjade's epilogue, it's mentioned that Haymitch is like spends his time now in District 12 using geese. And I'm like, I already know this is gonna wreck me. Later, about like extra info about Lenore Dove is also mentioned that Lenore Dove doesn't really sing that much. Like she can sing beautifully, but she's like very shy and like doesn't like singing in front of people. So Haymitch always thinks it's a treat to hear her sing. And it is also mentioned that the cubby doesn't sing anymore, which is devastating. They just play music, they don't have a singer anymore. What are you talking about? Like obviously, Lucy Gray isn't around anymore. But what other people say in ballad, it's so devastating to know that they don't sing anymore. After like Haymitch is done with his work, he goes to meet with Lenore Dove before the weeping happens, and they have like the discussion. They mentioned something about like, oh, the sun will rise again tomorrow, and Lenore Dove is like, you can be certain of that. It's not that it's risen every single day so far, that will also rise tomorrow. And then Haymitch mentioned something about it's kind of like the weeping being on my birthday every year. As long as my birthday, there will be a weeping. And Lenore Dove says, no, listen, think about it. You're saying today is my birthday and there's a weeping. Last year on my birthday there was also a weeping. So every year there will be a weeping on my birthday. But you have no way of knowing that. I mean, the weeping didn't even exist until 50 years ago. Give me one good reason why it should keep happening just because it's your birthday. And again, this wrecked me because just the thought, like what did Haymitch do? It's for his birthday without the weeping. I want to know. I want to know so bad. And then like some stuff happened, nothing worth mentioning right now. Then we get into the weeping, and this went down so differently than I thought it would. But we have a woman weeping the names, saying the names, and that's already a change from the games in the ballad, because in that book we just had the mayor do the pulling of the names. And for the girls we have Luella McCoy and Maisie, what was her name? I forgot it. Donner. I don't know, I forgot it. And Maisie Donner. We already know about Maisie from the original trilogy. And then for the boys we have Wyatt Callow and Woodbin Chance, which made me go, huh? And I thought, wait, did Haymitch volunteer? Why did we didn't get that as a mention that Haymitch volunteered, you know? But no, Woodbine and his cousins end up winning. And they wind up getting shot. Chaos erupts. The mother of Woodbine tries to get to his body to be able to properly say goodbye, which Lenore Dove is trying to help her with. And then the peacekeepers are like trying to restrict Lenore Dove, and Haymitch gets upset at that, and then they're about to do something to Haymitch, and Plutarch stops them. And it's like, wait, we already have too much bloodshed that we need to clean up in like this time that we got. How about like that's our next tribute? Which is insane. That's so Plutarch already, but also so insane that it's like Plutarch is the reason that Haymitch got into the games, you know? I mean, technically Haymitch's own actions are a bit of a reason why he got into the games. But Plutarch in this book is so interesting to me because I feel like his future as a big guy in the rebellion is so clear, and he might already be in the rebellion, but also, God, he is frustrating. Because here's the thing why I always thought Plutarch is a very interesting character, is he's so good at being able to play both sides. And I think that's because Plutarch is playing his own side, his own game, and it doesn't really matter what side he's on. I mean, it does to him, because obviously he chooses the rebel. She chooses rebels, but because he's playing his own game, he can very easily justify his actions as what he does in the capital as something like, oh, this might be a bit bad now, but ultimately will put me in a better position so that I can help the rebels, you know, because he's playing his own game, and he only really, that's how I interpret that character. By the way, I feel like we don't know enough about Plutarch to have that be firm, but like that's how I always interpreted him as a character, and seeing that in this book makes it feel even more, because like I said, I don't know at this point if he is already on the Bible side or not, but you can see him just like his gears turning, and you can see a lot of similarities between him in this book and in that original trilogy, and how he makes propaganda videos for the rebellion in Mockingjay, and how he basically is the leader of propaganda for this. Is so, like, not the leader of propaganda, because propaganda is more what's going on, but in this moment of the weeping, he is very much in charge of like, oh, if we do this and this, it will look like this. I think that's interesting, but also in a way that's kind of in service of attributes, which I think is interesting. So that's why I say his side to the rebellion is already very clear, even if he is not officially on that side yet. So yeah, what they end up doing is that, of course, when they mention that Haymitch is going into the games instead, Leonardov gets upset, and again the peacekeepers try and like do something to her, and then Plutarch stops them and is like, we should get a camera on this girl and like show her visible upset, because that will play good with the audiences. So in that sense, he's like saving Leonardov, but like also, you know what I mean, like he is using her for capital benefits, but also at the same time saving her from a detrimental future. I think that's such an interesting character. And then ultimately they run out of their time because the live stream is like 5 minutes behind what's actually happening, so they've had to like hurry all of this along so that like the blood and the bodies are cleaned up and like they can pretend like nothing happened. And they decide to do the weeping of the boys again, with of course Wyatt being called up and then later Haymitch. And then they don't allow the tributes to say goodbye to their families like they typically do, because of like the whole thing that happened. It's like a punishment. But then Plutarch convinces them, I believe it's Haymitch and Luella, yes, Haymitch and Luella's families, to like react in front of the camera. And Luella's family doesn't really go along with it. They refuse to perform, but then Haymitch's family does. But it does give both Luella and Haymitch a moment with their family before they send off, which they wouldn't have gotten, which again, like technically he's using these families for capital gain, but at the same time he's giving these kids and these families a moment together, which they otherwise wouldn't have. And then they get ushered onto the train, and then it's mentioned that Haymitch sees Leonardov waving him goodbye, like breaking loud finally fully, which he didn't do properly in front of the cameras either. And Haymitch also breaks down, and I love this line, the moment our hearts shattered, it belonged to us. Especially because kind of like the winning team throughout this book, which is also mentioned earlier, is they will not use our tears for their entertainment. It's mentioned, something similar has been mentioned a couple of times already in these 100 pages. And just to have that line, the moment our hearts shattered, it belonged to us, it just... It's also mentioned in Haymitch's inner monologue as he's like on the train waiting, that Leonardov's convinced there must be people outside of Panem far to the north, which is kind of... I have my notes, I wrote, so that Covey legend remains, but ultimately it's not like a Covey ID, it's a rebel ID in ballad, and that's what Lucy Gray and Snow were escaping to. So I think that's interesting, that that's a thing that stays alive well enough that Leonardov knows about it like all these years later. And then, you know, we spend some time on the train, they talk, Haymitch and Luella form a allyship, and it's also mentioned that when they get lunch, all their utensils and everything is made out of plastic. And Haymitch mentions easy to spray down and sanitize after we're out, I guess. And I literally wrote, plus no easy weapons, because it's much harder to make weapons out of plastic utensils and cutlery than out of like actual metal ones, or like even a glass plate, like a porcelain plate that would be shattered so easily and turned into a weapon. And then it's also mentioned that again the districts 1, 2, and 4 are careers, which I think is interesting. We already know this, but knowing that it's also at Haymitch's time, I think is... I really am interested in to know when they become known as careers, and also when District 11 gets kicked out of that race, because in the Battle of Songbirds and Snake it is mentioned that District 1 and 2 are very popular because they're the richest, and then 4 and 11 are also the most wanted by the academy students to mentor, because those are the districts kind of like that have easy access to food because they produce food. So those are seen as the 4 strongest districts at like for in the games at the time of the Battle of Songbirds and Snakes. So and they don't call them careers yet, so I do wonder how we got to the fact that they're called careers, and then also to the fact that District 11 isn't considered one anymore. That's something I think is very interesting and I want to know more about. And then of course, when talking about the games before, it is mentioned that, you know, the mentors are still being decided for them because they don't have like go-to mentors, because there was no other victor of District 12, no other living victor of District 12. As it is mentioned that in 50 years we've only had one victor, and that was a long time ago. A girl who no one seems to know anything about. Back then, barely anyone in 12 had a television, so the games were mostly hearsay. I've never seen her in the clips of the old shows, but then those early efforts are rarely featured, as they are said to be badly filmed and lacking in spectacle. My parents weren't born yet, and even Mama couldn't tell me about the girl. I brought up our Victor with Lenore Dove a few times, but she never wanted to discuss her. Which, by the way, that last line makes me think that Lenore Dove does know about Lucy Gray, which, you know, would be difficult knowing that her family are direct relatives to Lucy Gray that were alive at the time Lucy Gray won. So, of course, you know, they would know. And that Lenore Dove refuses to talk about it makes me think that she knows it's related to her family, because in some aspect I know it's like a traumatic thing for her family in that sense, like for the Covey, but like that's family even if it's not by blood. So that's interesting. And also, I feel like Lenore Dove and Lucy Gray would have adored each other, and I'd stand by that. Everything we learn about Lenore Dove, I'm like, oh my god, girl, Lucy Gray would be your best friend. Like, if she was still alive, she would be like such a great aunt to you. Like, she would love you so much. And I also feel like Lenore Dove would think Lucy Gray was a badass. I feel like she would question why she ever fell in love with Slow, but like that's it. And then in the train, they point out a cake for Hamish, which, you know, all of the tributes immediately see through and see that as a way to create another moment for them to look good to the rest of the capital. So they just refuse to eat the cake, which I think is great. And then because they all refuse the cake, Plutarch decides to continue talking about Stylist, and then begins a whole fight between Drusilla and Maisie, and I love it. I feel like it is such a good moment where Drusilla does slap Maisie first, and Maisie just like attacks right back, which then puts Drusilla in more, like, eventually Drusilla gets the upper hand, and Plutarch stops Drusilla and says, Drusilla, stop Drusilla, we have to put her on camera tomorrow. Isn't that, and I racked parallel to Haymitch and Catching Fire, where, I mean, I guess in that Catching Fire was more severe, where he saves Katniss from a whipping because like she has to be put on camera because for like her wedding in a couple of days, and there's no way that, you know, the whipping will be healed in time, and it would piss off like the greater capital, like Snow and everything. That's the way Haymitch saves Katniss in Catching Fire. And then for Plutarch to also like basically use the same excuse, just different context, to save Maisie. So interesting. Like I said, Plutarch, a very interesting character. And there's also a thing I forgot to mention. As his birthday present, let me quickly grab the original cover. Lucy Gray had this made, and this, it's a flint, or what's it called? It's made, you can use it to make fire, basically. And there's this Haymitch's token into the gate. I also wanted to mention that really quickly, because I think that's actually great to have like a mockingjay and a snake. Weirdly symbolic for their family, the Covey, but a great symbol. It's also revealed that Wyatt is an odds maker, so like his family is in the business of gambling, and he calculates like the odds for things, which, you know, makes Haymitch not really like him, especially because his family also allows betting on the Hunger Games, which is a thing that in the districts is not officially allowed, but is also not really like regulated or like punished. So it happens in a lot of the districts, even though a lot of people also like look down on it because it is seen as such like a gross thing to bet on children's lives, which makes sense. And that's also why Haymitch is kind of like against Wyatt because of it. But he has also mentioned that their stylist is basically incompetent and does the same thing over and over again, and he has been on like shaky grounds this year, like about to be fired. And of course he puts them in like the very typical minor costumes that he's always done, so like people are like, it's not looking great for him. And then, you know, because the stylist is also late, they very last minute are thrown into their chariots as they, you know, do like the little lap. And I don't understand what fully happens, but from my understanding, someone in the audience shoots off fireworks just as like a celebratory thing, but it goes on and goes into the direction of the District 12 chariot, and then chaos ensues in which Luella tries to escape and she's shut down because of it. I think that's how it happened. It's just, a very whirlwind of sentences, and I'm not entirely sure just exactly how things went down, but that's my understanding of it. And the three of them kind of gather around her body. They see the peacekeepers coming over to them, and they mention like her body doesn't belong to them. So Hamish ends up taking her and running and running, and eventually he stops and he's like right in front of Snow's balcony, and he drops her body and like starts applauding, and he says it as in a monologue, and I love it. Spin this, Plutarch. Ooh, love that so much. And then ultimately they do end up like the peacekeepers end up in capturing Hamish, and Lala's body is taken care of. And what I do think is very interesting is at first he struggles against them capturing him, and then he realizes like, why the fuck am I doing that? It's just making me tired. So he just like completely goes like limp, and then the peacekeepers kind of like force him to walk on his own instead, which I think is so interesting that even that is seen as like an act of rebellion. Okay, so I had to step out for a while, but I'm back. I'm ready to tell you more about what happened. So after the whole like parade thing, I don't know what to call it, they are backstage, I guess, and one of the guys from District 3 comes up to Hamish to be like, hey, want to be my ally? Because he is basically gathering a group of tributes to be able to have a force against the careers, which makes sense because, you know, 2 tributes from 3 career districts is 6. That's already a lot, but now we're doing double, so that's 4 tributes for 3 districts. That's 12 people. That's a lot of people. So if it makes sense to also try together like a group, because how are you ever on your own gonna survive 12 people attacking you? There was no way. Anyway, and after they get brought to like the apartments where they're staying, and our tributes are introduced to their mentors, which is first of all Virus, who I love, and then our second mentor is Max. Too precious for my soul. And then we are the next day, the next morning, and the group of the 5 of them are kind of like discussing strategies. And something I thought was really interesting is that they mention like, what do you want to get out of these games besides surviving? Hamish and Wyatt mention not wanting a long horrible death, like not a drawn out death, something very quick. And then Maisie mentions that she doesn't want to beg or plead for her life, she wants to die with her head up. And then, you know, they take that in, and Hamish says that something else he wants is, I want to remind people I'm here because the capital won the war and thinks that 50 years later this is a fair way to punish the districts, but I'd like them to consider that 50 years is enough. And then Maisie asks him, so you want to make them end the Hunger Games for good? How? And then Hamish says, I don't know yet. I guess for starters by reminding the audience that we're human beings. The way they talk about us, Piglet's beast, they call my fingernails claws. You saw how the kids outside the gym looked at us, like they think of us as animals, and they think of themselves as superior, so it's okay to kill us. But the people in the capital aren't better than us or smarter. And then they go a bit in that, and they're like, okay, how do we do this? And they mention like outsmarting the games in some way, like Virus did. And then Hamish literally says, right, but I'm not as clever as Virus. I can't outthink the arena, which is interesting because that's how he ends up winning, outthinking the arena. We know that. They also mentioned that the trick would be to show it on camera, and the only way to do that is killing someone else or killing yourself, Wyatt says. And that makes me think there's gonna be people who have a better memory than me. Is that a thing that gets mentioned that is allowed to? Because that seems like something the capital would try to put a stop to if they notice a tribute trying to kill themselves. I don't know if that's something that we have a history of actually happening, but I generally feel like that's a thing that they would be against. Okay, and so after they've discussed that, they go talking about like, oh, training, what that looks like and what to focus on. And Virus ends up singing a song: first avoid the slaughter, get weapons, look for water, find food, and where to sleep, fire and friends can keep, which is the way she, during her games, kind of like reminded herself the priority of things, because she knew she wasn't really a fighter, so like avoid the slaughter and like focus on finding weapons and water, and then after that food and sleep, and then allies, least important for her in her games. And then Mags does mention that like allies were the things that helped her survive the most, so that was the most important thing to her. And like look at the difference in, look at the arena and see what applies most to you, what will help you the most, and stick to that order of operations. And I do think it's interesting that Virus's song start with first of all slaughter, get weapons, look for water, because when it comes to the 74th Hunger Games, Hamish's biggest advice for Katniss and Peeta is don't go to the cornucopia because that's going to be a massive slaughter, so avoid the slaughter. And then his other thing is like, just run as far as you can and try to find water as fast as you can. Like, that's his main advice. Like, avoid the cornucopia, avoid the slaughter going on there as everyone is going for weapons at the same time, and look for water, which is quite literally the first two lines of Iris and Thorn. I think that's so interesting. And yeah, we're still talking a bit about strategy where I left off, and I think we're about to go into training, so I will check with you in another 100 pages, and I'll see you then. Hi, so I'm at page 200 of Sunrise. This is how the tabbing situation is looking like, in case you want to know. Also, correction from before, Luella didn't try to run away. I got it all wrong. I don't know where that came from, but in kind of like the chaos of the chariot from District 12 kind of going off course, there was just like a lot of chaos with other chariots, and Luella got crushed by it. I don't know where I got it from that she tried to run away. I really don't. But there we go. That's a correction from last time. So let's talk about this, where we left off, and all the things that happened since then. So where we left off, they were kind of like discussing strategy before the training abundant session. So after that, we of course have training, and there's Hamish kind of keeps an eye on the other people that this guy Ampert said he was already like in cahoots with. And what I think is interesting is there is a moment where Hamish realizes just how little peacekeepers there are in the training center compared to tributes and weapons for tributes, and how easy access the tributes have to weapons. And I think there's a moment where he and another tribute are like in conversation, and they both, in like the looks that they give, realize that they very easily could attack if they want. And then Plutarch like joins them and basically is like says what they were thinking, basically. Like, he notices that that's a thing that they were thinking about, and he says it out loud. And then he does ask them, why do you submit to it all? And then he says this thing, which I think is very interesting, where Hamish is like, oh, because of their weapons and everything, like, we don't want to wind up dead, that's why we submit. And then he says, do you really not see that? And Plutarch answers, no, I do. I see the hangings and the shootings and the starvation and the Hunger Games. I do, Plutarch says. And yet I still don't think the fear they inspire justifies this arrangement we've all entered into. Do you? Why do you agree to it? Why do I, for that matter? Why have people always agreed to it? When we don't respond, he shrugs. Well, it's something to think about. Which, I don't know, I really like that quote. To be like, there's all these things going on, but like, it's not. When it comes to the freedoms, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it better than how it says. I just think that's beautifully worded. I don't know why. And then Hamish just decides to go to Maisie and Wyatt, and basically it's like, hey, we should team up with Empire and these guys. Like, it's a smart decision. So let's try and do that. And so they do. And Empire mentions that his father is there, and Hamish is like, he's nuts. But then turns out his father is actually there because who is his father? Beatty. Suzanne Collins really wants to destroy me. But Beatty, who you don't know, is also one of the tributes in the 75th Hunger Games. And it's really, he mentions that, okay, first of all, after Beatty mentions like, oh yeah, no, that's actually my kid, I'm his mentor, Hamish is in the middle and goes, the real question is, how did Empert end up here with him? Two tributes reap from one family, are they just the unluckiest family in Panem? Which, you know, I'm not convinced, like some people, that every reaping is rigged. That's just insane. But it's definitely possible for some reapings to be rigged, and this is one of them, which Beatty confirms because he says that he tried to sabotage the Capitol's communication system, and because they couldn't kill Beatty because, you know, that would look bad to kill one of the victors. And it also says, I'm too valuable to kill, which is true. Beatty is like a talent, like super smart, so it makes sense that they wouldn't want to get rid of him. So they put his son in the games, and then as punishment made him a mentor, which is absolutely sad. He says, they even gave me a booth in training, which mentors don't traditionally attend, so I wouldn't miss a minute. If I wasn't here to witness it, there would be no point, which is just, it's so devastating. And then they do kind of start talking about, like, of course, Beatty's booth with is to make electricity with potatoes, which I also think is very interesting. And there's a moment where Hamish mentions something like Virus said, and Beauty responded, well, I would listen to her. Having been a mentor, I know how clever she is. Which just knowing how their dynamic is in the 75th games, I can't. Of course, why did I not think of the fact that Beauty could have been Virus's mentor? I never thought of that. And it just makes the connection so much stronger, and I feel like their friendship is very underrated. I don't see a lot about that. I feel like people talk about Finnick and Max a lot, which makes sense because that's also fucking devastating. But Virus and BD are like similar dynamic, with of course the age difference being not as large as Max and Phoenix, but you know. And also at a certain point, BD mentions that he congratulates Hamish with his 16th birthday, like happy belated 16th birthday, and then he says, "That's funny. I was sweep today you were born." And just something about that sentence whacked me because what do you mean? And then Hamish joins the group again, and Maisie has been making Empire's like token into a necklace and make it look pretty, and that's how Maisie ends up making friends with some of like the other people as well in the districts by making them like prettier tokens because she's good at that. And then they all go to lunch and they kind of have like a little meeting between like their group of allies, which they end up calling the newcomers. And as they are going on, Plutarch comes to Hamish and it's like, Snow wants to talk to you, which that's never a good sign. So they go to the Heavenbee's house, and there like an interesting scene happens there between Plutarch and Hamish. And then Snow comes in, and Snow is very visibly ill, which Hamish immediately notes, but Plutarch also takes a note of, which I thought was interesting because I feel like Snow isn't the type of man to show himself when sick, but he's like vomiting in front of them as well. And then there was this funny thing where he just like is feeling upset, and Plutarch is like, "Oh, I should probably get you something to drink, like some water," and Snow is like, "Milk, please." And so they send Hamish to go get the milk, and Hamish is like grabs a pitcher out of the fridge, drinks it, and then walks to them, and it's like, "Oh, whoops, it's empty." And I feel like that's the funniest side of rebellion I have ever seen. Like, truly iconic. You just see a full pitcher of milk and be like, you know what? I'm gonna fuck this bitch up. And then like drink it all. And be like, yeah, no, there was no milk in the fridge. What are you talking about? But Pluto goes to a different room and does notice, like does get some other milk, which is wild. And then after Snow drinks the milk, he asks for some more and also some bread. And Plutarch says that with a stomach bug or something, it isn't very smart to eat like bread. And Snow says, not an illness, food poisoning, a bad batch of oyster, but I fared far better than Incitatus Lumi. The parade master asked Plutarch, a funny look was in his face. Was he? That bitch poisoned the bitch! And then Snow and Hamish do get talking, and Snow immediately notices like Hamish's token, and like he looks at it and sees an inscription on it, and it says like from LD, and he's like, who is that? And Hamish answers Lenore. And then Snow's like, but Lenore what? No, don't tell me. Let me guess. D. That's a tough one. None of the usual suspects, but they so rarely are. I can think of plenty prefaced by deep or dark blue, dark green, but that's not how they work. Perhaps something in nature, like amber or ivory, daffodil, dandelion, diamond. No, that's not a color at all, really. All right, I'm stumped. Lenore what? Which, like, how did he just immediately clock Covey? Like, Hamish is also confused about how he knows the Cubby naming conventions, but obviously we know about that. But like, how did this bitch clock immediately? Like, oh, his girlfriend must be Cubby. Like, does he just immediately assume, because it is a mockingjay and a snake? Does he just immediately see a mockingjay and think Cubby, or does he recognize, because it is made by Temember, and that's someone he knows? And I don't remember if Temember doing like metalworking is mentioned about zombies and snakes, but does he just recognize his work? Is that it? Or is this like just because if this is just like general, you know, Snow having spies everywhere, knowing everything, the way he knew about Katniss going into the woods, like, is because if it's that, he probably would have known Lenore Dove's name, you know? You wouldn't have had to ask about it. So I wanted to know how he just immediately clocked Copy, because that's wild. Because it's even mentioned in the book earlier that Temember does make stuff for other people as well. So I highly doubt that he recognizes the craftsmanships because, you know, he makes things an assignment for non-coffee people as well. So if it would be recognizing of craftsmanship, it would also probably go with the idea of, oh yeah, but everybody in District 12, like, I don't know if there's like the direct connection with coffee there. I don't know, man. I'm confused. Anyway, I do think there's like this interesting thing where he's like trying to compare Leonard Off obviously to his relationship with Lucy Gray. And he says, like, she's delightful to look at, especially around in bright colors and sings like a mockingjay. You love her, and oh, how she seems to love you. Except sometimes you wonder because her plans don't include you at all. Which I thought was such a hypocritical line to say. Because if you would have asked Lucy Gray about anything, she probably would have been like, oh yeah, if he wants to come along, or like if he wants to, if he's up to it, I don't mind Snow coming along with me. And perfect. In fact, I would prefer it, but I'm not pressuring him to do anything. And then if you would ask Snow about his plans, and you would ask if Lucy Gray was in there, you would be like, oh shit, yeah, I forgot about her. Really ironic that he says that, but obviously he's so self-involved that he doesn't see that. And then it is mentioned that in these games there's gonna be MUDs and that they are specifically programmed for, like, each MUD is specifically programmed for each individual tribute, which I also think is interesting, especially because there's so many tributes. You put in that effort to have different MUDs based on the different tributes and whatever they have going on. And he also says, I will orchestrate your death based on your behavior from here on out. You decide what you want Lenore, Dove, and your mother, and a dear little brother of yours to see. You can die clean and fair, or we can open the games with the slowest, most agonizing death ever to befall a tribute. And yes, you should be thanking me for giving you the option. Which is probably the most brutal thing Snow has ever said. Like, oh my god. Seriously. And then Snow calls out someone from behind, like, that was hiding before, and it's Luella. And then we go into part 2, which is called The Rascal. We went from part 1, the birthday, to part 2, the rascal. And very quickly, as Luella kind of like comes in, Haymitch immediately is like, that's not her. Like, she looks identical, but something's off, which, you know, is interesting. And all she can say is, my name is Luella McCoy, I'm from District 12. And then Haymitch also realizes, like, through something Snow says, that the parade master, I'm not gonna repeat his name, I can't do it, was probably poisoned, and that for some reason Snow survives, which we know is because Snow poisons himself all the time, and that they're gonna try and convince the entire world that Luella survived because that was never aired. Soon as District 12's chariot kind of goes, of course, that's immediately when the broadcast was cut off, so only the people physically there know what happened, and even then only Haymitch, Maisie, and Wyatt are the only people who know fully exactly the extent of the, like, damage, I guess, done to Luella's body. So to other people, they could very much convince, like, oh, she was very badly injured, but like, we fixed her. And Plutarch also, of course, knows what's going on as he brings Haymitch and Luella out of the building. Haymitch does ask who she is, and Plutarch answers with best guess, child of traitors. Could be either district or capital, she might not even know herself. No question they've programmed her, probably drugged her as well, which is just so fucked. And then at a certain point, Luella says, you're my hero. I hope I'm just like you when I grow up. Oh, wait a minute, that won't be happening. Which honestly pains me that they thought of that, but also, like, just genuine question. If this girl somehow survived, what would they have done? Like, I know there was no way in hell that she would have ever made it out of the arena. Even if all the other tributes managed to avoid her, they would have put in much anything to kill her. Probably even something eternal that they can switch up. I don't know. They would have found a way. There is no way that Luella would have been the victor of the Hunger Games. Like, you know, you're never fully in control of what happens. Like, what if? What if? Were you just gonna have these games not have a victor then if she's the last one standing? And like faked a heart attack or like something to which she died, like, you know, capital? Like, what was their plan? Just in a very, 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 very unlikely event that she was the victor, what would they have done? Is so, that's something I keep thinking about. And then back when they arrive at the apartment, Maisie and Wyatt also immediately noticing like, Maisie and Wyatt also immediately notice that Luella isn't Luella. And then, you know, they give her food, and she immediately like attacks the food, which makes Haymitch think that they obviously like really starved her, also just like from physicalities and stuff. And when they go to put her to bed, the rest still talks, and Haymitch is like, I can't call her Luella. That's no, I can't do that. So they suggest to from now on use a pet named Lulu. So that's how I also will be referring to her from now on. We also get mentioned when Max returns from putting her to bed that she noticed that there's some sort of device attached to his chest pumping drugs into her, she thinks, and she was afraid to remove it because she thought it might kill her because she had seen something similar before. And earlier, they also mentioned that she could potentially be from District 11, and Max clarified that she thought that because she offered like a basket of bread, and she went for bread with like this with seeds in it, which is the very typical bread for District 11, which by the way I already thought this in the Hunger Games, that it's so interesting that each district has their own like kind of bread, like distinctive kind of bread. I think that's so interesting. And then like kind of Virus told him beforehand like pay attention in a training center to like what's there and stuff, because typically there will be clues there to the theme of the arena. Like she says that during her time, like last year, her games in the training center, there was a lot of reflective surfaces, and then obviously in the games she immediately noticed like it was because that's the entire thing. And so she's like, I didn't realize until I was in the games because I didn't know, but you know, the fact that I noticed now, I'm telling you to pay attention to different things going on. And they noticed that, so now they're kind of like going over the things that they saw that stood out to them. And Wyatt mentions that there were a lot of tarps that were used, and then Maisie notices that each district has a different color outfit, and it corresponds to what they wore in the chariots as well, so that was matching. So she thinks that the outfit they're going into the games with is also going to be in that color, so for each district it's different, so that it's more noticeable. And she also notices that because theirs is black, it probably will make it easier to move around and hide at night. And Haymitch just tells them about Beady and a potato, and how there is this other source of light basically has been taught to them, while you know fire should be very typical. So that makes them think that fire is probably going to be difficult, and then in combination with the tarps makes them think it's going to be like a very wet arena, so therefore it probably you won't be able to make fire because it will be too wet for things to catch on. So that's the assumption that they make about Yorila. And Maisie doesn't feel comfortable sleeping alone in the room with Lulu, which makes sense. I also wouldn't. So they all decide to sleep in that room. And also, while doing that, take turns taking watch to kind of like practice during the games. But also, so if Luella ever goes, like if Lulu ever goes loose, there's someone watching. And then during the night, Beady actually comes to get Haymitch out of the room, and they have shut off the entirety of the electricity system, and they come up with this plan, like they have come up with this plan, they're telling Haymitch about it, that under the arena is also a control room. It's not just the outside control room that honestly we only see in the movies. I don't think we talk about that in the other books, but that is also shown during the broadcast of the games. Sometimes there is the actual like a big control room is also underneath the arena, and from there they like unleash the mud, stuck the feet. And there's also the place that they are launched from, and like you know a lot of like things happen there. It's a very important area, and it's called the arena's brain, they call it. And what their plan is because him was just like, oh, so we should like, what is the plan? Just like pull the plug because like a big computer. And BD's like, that's impossible. We're not gonna do that. What we're gonna do is drown it. My note literally says, let's go. Yeah, I love you can see that because I was so hyped already. So basically next to this like brain, I guess, is this massive tank of water, which is kept for, you know, the lakes if it needs to rain, like stuff like that. For every bit of water that's in the arena, that's what this massive tank is for. And BD tells them that he didn't get to see a plan of the arena beforehand, which is probably because they already already knew about his betrayal, I guess. But he did like oversee the plans for the brain, the control center. So he saw that this massive tank is even more big this year, which confirms the idea that it will be a very water-based arena this year. So they plan to explode that tank so that the rest of the control center will be just completely in water, and like everything will be destroyed. And well, Haymitch is like, okay, so how do we do that? Like, how do we get there? And Beatty mentions that in the arena there's different hatches that attach to the facility below, because that's how the mutts enter and leave the arena. So the plan is for Haymitch to pay attention to the mutts, and as they leave, see where they go down in, and then to go down in there himself, go to the tank, explode it. And there's also like plans to put explosives in the arena as well. And then of course it will be him and Emperor to kind of like try to do that, because Emperor also knows about the mission, obviously. At the moment, the thing they kind of don't know yet how to do is how to get some of the parts in, but also how to, because you have to, of course, light the fuse with fire, how to get fire there. Haymitch is immediately like, oh, I have this thing that makes fire. That's my token. So that's great. And then the next morning, it is mentioned that Lulu tugs on her ear a lot, and Haymitch thinks that is because she might have like an earache, because she says his brother does that a lot when he has an earache. But Maya's mentioned that she thinks there's an audio implant in her ear that probably goes two ways, so that the people of the capital can also like tell her what to say, or like be in control of her actions, that sense as well, but they can also hear everything going on around her. So obviously they have to be careful around Lulu. And then in training, Haymitch and Emperor try to get 9 and 11 to join them as well, because they haven't yet, and they both do it in different ways and succeed. Although Haymitch does get the help of Maisley, because you know the people of 9, I think he's in charge of, like 11, I forgot, but like, you know, the people that he would talk, they were very shy, very withholding, and like he was like having friendly conversation but nothing really. And then one of the girls like got broken by one of the other people, like one of the couriers, and Maisley ends up fixing it, and that's how they eventually join them. And then it's also mentioned that the District 5 has joined the couriers, and then they go in front of the, what's it called again, game makers, you know, the whole getting scores thing, and Haymitch ends up getting a 1, which is just as brutal as Katniss's 12, just in a very different way. Because by giving Katniss a 12, they painted a target on her back during the games, but by giving Haymitch a 1, they made sponsors impossible. So it's like a sense of punishment as well, which I think is very interesting. I know I've seen online a lot of comparisons between Luella and Haymitch, Luella and Katniss, and probably why Haymitch took to Katniss is that she physically looks a lot like Luella, which it's very confirmed by the casting. I do have to say, like, the little girl playing Luella does look like a very young version of Jennifer Lawrence. So in that sense, it does make sense a little bit, and I'm sure it also played into things. But the parallels between Katniss and Haymitch are so big. Throughout this entire book so far, this is just like the one time I'm fully noted on it, because it is like the same, but just like in reverse. And it is mentioned in that original trilogy that, because there was a conversation, I think in Catching Fire, or at the end of the first book, I don't remember exactly, where they talk about how Katniss got a lot of sponsored things sent to her, but then Peter barely got any. And it seems that Haymitch just like, even though it seems like Haymitch likes Peter more, he definitely likes Katniss more, because they just know how to communicate with each other. Like, they're on the same page constantly, but with Peter it's different. And that's a big part as well why Haymitch sent the sponsored things to Katniss instead of Peter, because he knew that Katniss would immediately understand what he meant by those things, even if he could not say things, obviously. Because that's why I think it's stupid that there's notes with them in the movie, because like in the book, it's the whole thing is like, oh, it's sent at this time and it's this thing exactly, which might not be the most obvious choice, because it is a sense of communication, and at Katniss, it's sent to Katniss and not to Peter, because Katniss is on the same page as Haymitch, so she can figure it out what Haymitch actually means by sending these things at this particular time. But you know, if you're gonna include notes, why wouldn't you write just the purpose of it on them? But oh well. So it is mentioned in the original trilogy that Haymitch and Katniss are very similar. And honestly, I feel like this book is just even more confirming that, because it's so much of the things that Haymitch does and encounters, you see so many direct parallels to Katniss that it's like, obviously she was his favorite, because like they're the same. They're the exact same. And then when they went in for the points, they also had to hand in their token so it could be inspected, and then the next morning it's back waiting for them. And then they also go into practice for the interviews. And Maisley manages to piss off Drusilla yet again by just insulting her fashion, which I think is great. And then as they're practicing, the prop team from Haymitch runs in, and it's like, our stylist is like high as shit because he licks toads, which he's an oddball. He's so weird. So they don't really know what to do now because, you know, the stylist is of this world. And then the female of the woman of the prep team, Prosperina is her name, she ends up calling her sister and like freaking out, and the sister tells them that everything will be fine and that to just keep a good attitude because a positive attitude is 97% of the battle. And they mentioned that, I was immediately like, Effie Trinket, is that your sister? Because that sounded like such an Effie line. And because of the casting, I know Effie is in this book, which by the way, Elle Fanning as like the casting for Effie out of this world. Like I keep picturing her because of that. Anyway, and then at the end of that conversation, someone comes into the room and it's a young woman with lavender hair dressed like a grape gumball and green checked stockings. Four black hats stacked on her head, cloth bags draped over her arms. She wheels her cart of spiky shoes to the center of the building room and announces, "Who's ready for a big, big, big day?" You can't tell me what her queen has arrived. Because I love Effie. I feel like she isn't a perfect character, obviously. She's a delight. I love every scene she's in. And of course, Effie has come to rescue her sister and dress the tributes. And they dress beautifully. So Drusilla's like, I'm gonna tell everyone you did this. And like, no, none of the credit is going to our actual stylist because he's shit. So then they go to like the green room for the interview. And generally, Drusilla is generally telling everyone that Effie did this, which is great for her. And then Haymitch ends up talking. No wait, and then the podcast starts with kind of like a recap of the different games, and here's where we learn some interesting things because after the 10 games, a lot changed. Because after the 10 games, the games weren't in the original arena where we saw them in. After that, they started using existing settings in the wild or bombed out towns and such, introducing an assortment of mods and a variety of weapons. So in the first Quell is mentioned, of course, what the Quell is, which is that the districts had to choose their own tributes. There was no reaping, which is also absolutely brutal, by the way. And then the commentary was from a relic of a woman named Call, which I think is an incredible description for her, a relic of a woman. She's vile. And by the way, it said, "Wu was credited with coining the phrase, 'May the odds be ever in your favor' for the anniversary," which, of course, that sentence came from that devil. Like, oh my god. Like, Dr. Guile is the absolute worst. Of course she came up. Like, she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill a bunch of kids. And you know what I'm gonna tell them? May the odds be ever in your favor." Because I'm that fucked up. Yeah, that's Guile. Of course it is. But for the first Quell, they also started doing the chariots, right? Which I do think is very interesting. That's when we started doing that. And then rather than scouting a location for the games, they built an arena for single use. That's also what happened. And then the cornucopia also made its first appearance. So, and then after that, they started using brand new arenas from each environment. So that's very interesting. I love learning about the history of the games. And then, but when they were in the green room, Haymitch also ends up talking to Beatty, where he mentions that while the tokens were under inspection, they put like, what's it called? Oh, they put the like fuse, like that. What is it? Like thread? They put that in like the necklace portion of his token. So they'd have that in the arena. And then they also mentioned that the District 9 sunflowers, that's the tokens of the District 9, which I said earlier, which one of was broken, that those were replaced to have explosives in them, and that the material that they were made out of is changed so you can very easily dissolve what it's made out of, so to get to the explosive. And then it is also said that Empert is planned to scavenge one from their persons, which means obviously when one of them dies that he quickly grabs the token before the bodies can be gathered. And then he also says, "We've also replaced that," and then they get interrupted, which I want to know what else they replaced. what's going on? And yeah, now we get into the actual interviews, and the careers kind of make themselves look dumb, and as soon as and they seem more interested in like boasting up their own skills rather than talking about them as a team. So when the newcomers come in, they very much emphasize their intelligence and also how they all work together as a team, which I also think is interesting. And then honestly, Haymitch takes the stage in a moment that reminds me very much of Peter. If you say Haymitch is a copycat of Katniss, he's only more perceptive to the things going on around him. That's the only difference between him and Katniss. But this moment, very Peter, where he's just like playing the game so well and like saying the exact right things to and capture the audience and like really play with them. And I honestly love it. And that's also where the name of the part comes from, the Rascal, because he was tasked to put himself up as a rascal and to gain attention that way. And then afterwards, it's also mentioned that Drusilla is married to the stylist, which is the most shocking news they could have ever given me. And then Plutarch ends up taking Haymitch aside and is like, I have a phone call for you. And Haymitch is like, oh fuck. So this is no again, I'm not in good graces. But it ends up being Lenore. Oh my god, so such a sweetie. Only problem is that they arrested her. That's because she ended up performing in front of the Justice Building on the stage of the Weeping, I think. And she sang the songs that she was forbidden by Clark Carmine to play, and that are The Goods in the Common, which we saw earlier, The Capitol Store, and then The Hanging Tree. Which I didn't even write anything next to. I just marked it as something like, it's like, yeah, that's a dangerous song. But yeah, they arrested her. She's probably like gonna get out the next day because like obviously it's not that much of a big deal, but she feels very responsible for Haymitch getting the one, which it's not the truth because he got the one because of what happened at like the parades, not well. And they do have like this beautiful moment where they promise to be together forever no matter what, like even as ghosts. And I thought it was like the sweetest thing in the entire world. And then after the phone call, Haymitch and Plutarch talk, obviously, and Plutarch also mentions that he has information to give to Haymitch about how to break the arena, which I don't know what. Okay, so he's with the rebels already, because that's something that I was going back and forth on while reading. It was like, okay, he's definitely has rebel mentality, but has he actually joined the people already? I don't know that, but he has. That's very clear now. And he mentions that his cousin was a game maker's apprentice, and so he got him drunk, and the info he got out of him is that the arena sun is in sync with our own, which means that you can orientate yourself with it very easily. And then a couple of years ago, the game makers came to the Heavensby Conservatory and Gardens, and they were very interested in discussing opening the berms. And then Haymitch is like, berms? And then he says, it's what a gardener calls those mounds of earth. She plants shrubs and flowers on them, and if the game makers are planning to open them in the arena, then something's either going in or coming out or both. So that's obviously hinting at like that's where the mud traps are gonna be, like the mud openings are gonna be. And then they all kind of end up taking pictures together, and Plutarch talks a bit about like how propaganda works. And he also mentions that the newcomers are probably going to be very popular because they don't like the careers already, because they try to appear too much to be like them, which he explains as, there's been a lot of concern in the capital lately that district citizens are aspiring to break in here. It's not entirely unfounded, particularly with people from 1 and 2 who work closely with us. Luxury and military, you know. There are capital-born folks assigned out there who've got mixed families they want to bring here now. Which is interesting, especially knowing about Sejanus, who was a 2 that moved to the capital. So we know it's possible. So it's very interesting that now there is like an intermingling of capital people and District 1 and 2 people, and that there is a fear that District 1 and 2 are going into the capital, want to come into the capital, want to be capital people and not district people anymore. So I do think that's interesting that that's like a big fear going on around at the time. So yeah, I don't know, I want to know on that. That's where we left off though. So I will see you next time when I read another 200 pages. Hi, I apologize for any background noise. I have my fan on because it's quite a hot day and I can't function without it. So you're probably gonna hear that buzzing in the background. I apologize. But I did get another 100 pages through the Ballad of Songbirds. No, I did get another 100 pages through Sunrise on the Replay. I'm very excited to talk to you about it. In my previous clip, I did read a part of Catching Fire. Let's actually get into things. So where we left things off, District 12 tributes were in the Heavensby's house with Plutarch to kind of shoot some like promo videos, like propaganda videos. And at this certain point in like conversation, Plutarch mentions, well, I'm despicable on many levels, but in this I'm on your side, which I feel like is the perfect description for Plutarch. Because is he a likable person? Does he do good in the series? Not really. But is he on the right side of history? Yes. That's the one thing you can trust him in. You can't trust him in anything else. And then the next morning is the morning before the games, when they're all like in the hovercrafts being taken to the arena. Lulu actually starts singing a song, and one of the girls from District 11 recognized that as a harvest song for kids, and she asks if that song is known within District 12, and Hamish is like no. So that basically confirms that Lulu is probably originally from 11, just as we suspected earlier, but like having this on that you shouldn't have knowledge of outside of District 11 basically confirms that she is. And then, you know, they all get launched up and they're all kind of a bit baffled about the surroundings. Even Hamish, he kind of like comes back to his senses when a bunny kind of like jumps up against his platform, which I thought was fun. And then as the gong goes, he like runs, grabs a bag, grabs a spear, and goes north, because that's the plan that was agreed upon beforehand. But I do think it's interesting because it is mentioned in Catching Fire that like all of the tributes basically go towards the mountain, and Hamish goes the opposite direction. He's the only one to go in that direction, and it's very funny to see that, knowing that Hamish only goes north because of the plan to blow up the water tank. So that's fun. And then in the original bloodbath at the cornucopia, 18 die. I do feel like I have to say that. And after that, Hamish is on his own. He tries to drink from a river, but like a bunny kind of like does the same, stops him, and that bunny ends up like immediately like and that's when he realizes, oh, the water was poisonous. And he, in his bag there were like these charcoal pellets, which he remembered that his mom often takes when she has indigestion, when she's like, you know, completely blocked. And he thinks like it's cool for them to put that in the bag because no one in the Hunger Games is going to be so full. And then, you know, as he realizes this is poison, he's like, oh, those shits could also be used to like, you know, help against poisoning some. So he takes them and then they make him vomit all of it up. So that's how he kind of like survives it. And then he also realizes like while he was running in the woods, he notices that there were a lot of like fruits hanging on trees and everything, on like apples, and like his bag was also full of like apples and potatoes and like stuff like that, and all those things are very easily found within the woods. He's like, that's weird, that's suspicious. But as he's like vomiting the shit up and realizing he's been poisoned by the water, he's like, oh, I get it, all that shit is full of poison, and the reason that they're also in my bag is because it's the only thing without poison, so the only food we can eat is from the cornucopia or from sponsors later on, which, you know, adds an element of fucked upness. And then in the evening we find out that of course we have the like portrayal of all the people killed during his trek in the woods. 2 more cannon shots go off, and ultimately a bunch of people die, but the one that's most important is Wyatt. How have we lost Wyatt already? That's brutal, that's mean, I don't like it. But yeah, Hamish spends the night hidden in a bush, except he's not that well hidden, because the next morning he's woken up by Lulu finding him, and just she's constantly saying, find Hamish, find Hamish, find Hamish. And she does, like, when Hamish asks her, like, who told you to find me, like, she tugs her ear, like, taps her ear and says, find Hamish. So it's, you know, the capital, which is interesting. Like, I want to know what the reasoning behind it was. But they kind of went into this issue where obviously Hamish is trying to find, like, the holes that the mutts are gonna come out of, because that's where he has to go into. And he can't properly do that with Lulu by his side, and then Lulu also is so ravenous, so hungry, that she just like attacks every food that she sees, which, you know, is not great considering all the food is poisonous except the ones that Haymitch has. So he does try to feed her, but like still after like little whiles, if she's not like occupied enough, she loses attention in that sense again. And ultimately she went into this bush of like flowers, and those flowers are supposed to be a healing plant, but something about it is off because she just like stops like breathing like very difficult. And at first Haymitch just like, oh, she must be allergic to these flowers, but then like she starts like bleeding and everything, and it's like, oh, those shit's poison. And it's a very dragged out tale. Haymitch ends up yelling, enough, she's not your plaything, because he knows. And during the interviews when like Lulu kind of like got a little bit she collapsed, and that's like very much like, oh, they probably like with that thing on her chest, they probably pumped something on her to like knock her out. And him is basically like yelling these things to be like, why can't you do this now, like why do you need to let her suffer? So instead Haymitch just like wipes off the pump, and then that's how she dies. So like technically that's a kill for Haymitch, but a mercy kill, so does that really count? And then also when the cannon goes off, he whispers in her ear, her back, like the ear that she like keeps tapping and stuff, so where probably the signal is. He mutters, you did this to her, this is who you are, murderers. Which great statement, love it. And then of course Haymitch doesn't want to give up the body really, so like he carries her and like starts to walk with her, but then he starts to get attacked by blue butterflies who just like sting him, and it's like an electric shock. He ends up dropping her, so the hovercraft does take her away, and then he actually uses his like flint to make fire. And then he remembers earlier seeing like these gas plants that will make like a big fire. Obviously when you put it on fire, that's what happens with gas. And he makes a fire over there, and poof, and like all the butterflies kind of like, not all, but like quite a lot of them ends up being singed, and the others like fly away. Then he kind of tries to non-suspiciously go after the butterflies to kind of see where they're hiding, and then he remembers that spot because he knows that's where I have to go into, because those butterflies were definitely mutts, and that's what I was supposed to look for. And then it just kind of comes to trying to find a way to find Empert, because you know that's the other person in his plan, and doesn't really know how to do that without looking suspicious. So he kind of goes up into a tree, and he has binoculars from his bag, and is like looking at where all the other tributes are, and he notices Ampere is actually walking towards him. So he comes up with this idea to kind of try to pretend like the only reason why he wants to talk to Ampere is to kind of know what all the other tributes are doing, because he obviously has gone the entire different direction, so he doesn't know that, and that does make sense to want to know what's happened to everyone else. And as info Ampere can give it, Ampere kind of comes up with the thing of like, oh, the other newcomers told me to come look for you. Oh, you still want to be a lone wolf? Oh, do you mind if I stay the night because now it's late and like I have to? That's kind of like the shit, but that's not true. And then in the night, Haymitch ends up like cracking the thing open, and they do that whole bit with doing an explosive on the tank where only Haymitch goes down and Bert stays up. And Haymitch is like, this fuse is really short because you know we have to smuggle all the shit in, so I have to run very quickly and get back up there or I'll be dead. But as he's going back up, he notices that shit's going on above, and it's mutts attacking Empert. And I'm trying to see if it says which animal it is. It's like rodent creatures that are attacking, carnivorous mutts that are attacking Empert, and even as Haymitch is kind of coming up, they kind of stay on Empert, so it seems like they are programmed especially for him. His look, his smell, his taste, which is fucking brutal. And there is no way that Haymitch can actually save him. And then of course that's the death of Empert. And then this is something that just broke my heart. Is Embert's been swallowed up by the capital, and his coffin will hold only these pearly white bones. A cannon fires. Somewhere Beatty's heart breaks into fragments so small it can never be repaired. Which, I don't know. That's just so upsetting to me. While this whole battle was going on, the tank did explode, and Haymitch kind of notices a little bit after it's like done with like being overcome with grief. He's kind of come to his senses. He realizes that stuff in the arena is messed up. It's not actually the way it should, but sadly enough, the whole thing still stands. The games aren't finished. They haven't fully broken the arena as they planned. Let me enter part 3, the poster. Things are gonna go down. I feel like what I read from this part is not too bad, but I feel like this last little chunk, oh, it's gonna destroy my soul. I feel it. As he realizes that the games truly are nowhere, even if the arena is kind of like not functioning properly, the mountain actually explodes. Turns out it's a volcano, lava is coming out, and like it creates chaos. And then Haymitch does again have a beautiful moment, I think, where he kind of like is just a bit desperate because he's like, okay, I needed to do this, I failed at it. The full force of my failure hits me. Who do I think I am? Why did I think I could change anything? That I could take on the capital with all its might and bring the Hunger Games to a standstill? Me, a 16-year-old kid from the trashiest district in Pan Am, with little schooling and no outstanding skills. I've got nothing but a big mouth and an inflated sense of my own self-importance. All foam, no beer, that's me, Neo Beer. It's just, it's devastating to see him think of himself that way, but also the way he describes himself is very similar to how one could describe Katniss, and she was the one to bring down the whole capital, which I do think is interesting because we do often talk about like Katniss is never supposed to be a chosen one character. She very much is just like the right person at the right time. This evolution would have gone on without her as well, but she was just there at the right moment. Could have been someone else, but it happened to be her. And I feel like this, like this whole book, I feel like the parallels between Haymitch and Katniss have been very obvious, but especially with like this little quote, it's just something that I could see coming out of Katniss's mouth, honestly. And that just further like solidifies how, if like Haymitch did a little bit different here, it could have been him. You know what I mean? I feel like that further emphasized the whole Katniss just happened to be at the right time. And now for Haymitch, the timing was right. Haymitch kind of continues going north towards the like end of the arena. So Ross is trying to find the generator for the games and destroy that, because maybe that will finally stop things. And when he gets kind of like towards the end, there's like this hatch that he gets lost in, and then when he comes out of it, he gets attacked by some of the careers. He ends up killing two, and another third is killed by Maisie, as mentioned in Catching Fire. And then after that, Maisie and Haymitch team up. And I was also mentioned that the lava wasn't hot, it was some sort of a gel that gave you chemical burns if it got under your clothes, then turned hard and slippery as ice on the ground. So that's also info to have. And you know, they share their food, have a moment together, and there's again a beautiful moment that reflects something earlier. But when the articular first like shifts to go to sleep, Haymitch goes to sleep first. He can't really fall asleep, and then Maisie says, "You need to sleep, but you can't, Haymitch." I know, but what I'm thinking, you and me, you remember what Empress said when you made us token. There's a long pause before she says, "Sure, I'll be your sister." Our hands reach out at the same time, clasp and then release. Night says, "I will over and let sleep take me." Beautiful moment. Haymitch does convince him to go back to the hatch and try and like hack through the hatch, but that backfires on them because there's ladybugs that kind of like end up sucking up that blood and then like exploding that blood all over them. So they were like, oh, that's not a good idea. And then after that, they agreed to kind of look for more of the newcomers around, because there should be a couple more alive. And at a certain point, they hear a male voice screaming, and they're like, oh, the only guys that are still alive are newcomers, so we should probably go after that and see what's going on. And it's like these massive porcupine kind of things that have poisonous, like, what's it called? They call it like quills? Is that how it's officially called? I don't know. And that like it's been shooting it off into our three leftover newcomers beside Maisie and Haymitch, and you know, it's poisonous, so it's not really doing well, and they can't really help the three of them because this like mud is still running amok. So they end up distracting the mud by throwing olives like his direction, so he will like shuffle after that and go eat it, which does work. But by the time the porcupine has gone off, 2 cannons have already gone off, so that means 2 deaths. And then Maisie tries to put like antidote into the mouth of one of the other, like the last remaining tribute, and that also fails. So just the 2 of them now as newcomers, which, oh, and there's another one running amok. I got that one. There's also another one still running around somewhere, but it is devastating to see just them all like die very slowly. And next night, and again, Haymitch isn't really able, still wants to go back to the hatch because he's come up with the idea to use like fire to blow open the hatch instead, and he can't really convince Maisie to go along with it, so he's like, okay, fine, we'll just like look for Willie, the other newcomer still on the block. And as they kind of are walking around, they end up stumbling across the 2 careers, so they run, and as they run, they end up stumbling upon game makers cleaning an area, which is a very messy scene, and I don't really fully understand what's going on, because the game makers are like, you aren't supposed to be here, and I'm like, bitch, you aren't supposed to be here, what the fuck is going on? And then one of the couriers ends up killing the game makers as they are like trying to escape the scene, which is so wild. You know, Mizzly and Hamish end up running away from there, and finally do have a little fight because Mizzly does feel a bit betrayed that, you know, it's one of the couriers that had to kill the game makers and not Hamish. But she does also understand Hamish kind of being frozen in fear at that moment, not really knowing what to do. So yeah, that's where I left things off. And like I said, I think these last 80 pages are gonna be the most devastating 80 pages of my life. It's 82 pages. I'm sorry. And I'm not ready for it. But I'm gonna read them, and then when I'm done, I'll tell you about them. The big thing just happened. I already had to collect myself from crying, so I thought I'd read the last 20 pages of this book together with you and capture my reaction. And let's see how it goes. I feel, oh, this is gonna devastate me. As I said, I already had to collect myself a moment. Let's go. Okay, so I have heard in particular that the epilogue is brutal. That's where I am now. I already think this book is brutal enough, so I don't want it, but oh well. First paragraph already has me, okay. Whew. I can't read. They're playing it off as appendicitis. I already think this book is brutal enough, so I don't want it, but oh well. Oh god. Okay. Last page. Oh god. First paragraph already has me, okay. Whew. I can't read. Okay, so quite literally the last thing I want to do right now is talk to you about this book. We left things off with Maisie and Hamish kind of making it up after their like little fight that they had. That they end up talking about Maisie's grandmother. She says, no one ever loved me more. I always hoped I'd look like her one day. Never going to see myself grow old, I guess. Maybe. Oh no, not after today. And there's also, she used to say, if I was afraid, it's okay, Maisie. Nothing they can take from you is ever worth keeping. And considering that, you know, Maisley's grandmother was probably old enough to be there, be alive, witness, which is where she sang that song. I mean, she also sang it other times, but like that's like the big moment. Then after that, they do go. They were successful in that. Mainly, it is because Hamish really wants to stay there. So, like, he wants to do that, and Maisie doesn't want to do that, and they also don't want to be the last two surviving because neither could possibly kill the other person. And he noticed that it bounces back from the generator. So he just sits there trying to think about what else he could possibly do. I didn't even know what to say. Oh my god. Nothing gonna. And she was attacked by. Let's talk to you about this book. How easily. I took a couple of minutes to collect myself. So let's start. I really don't. It's 82 pages. But it was. They end up talking about Maisley's grandmother. And after Maisley's death, Hamish goes to try and find. That happened out of sight. And like she's there, be alive. Like, she is really in a bad state. She hasn't eaten in like probably days. The big she looks absolutely starved. And Hamish actually is finding trouble even having her ingest water because that's just how bad it's gotten. The hitch at the edge, and they do. He does manage to feed her a little bit of that. I just mentioned that because Hamish really wants to stay there. Silka, you see that as an act of rebellion to like sit there at the edge, at the bottom of the tree, the arena, and like technically beyond it. So he ends up dropping some of the chocolate to her, which she ends up eating. And the next morning they wake up and Silka's gone. Probably still within the perimeter, so like they should be careful. But like she does like the pebble throwing thing. The generator, it bounces back from the generator, and there's probably like a force field around the generator as well. So he sits there trying to think about what else he could possibly do when he hears Maisley's. But there was a problem because it had just rained, so it's very hard to find like dry materials to be able to away, sadly enough. And then also a quote I really liked. It's Goodbye Maisie Dono, who I loaded and grudgingly respected and loved. Not as a sweetheart or even a friend, a sister, I'd said. But what is that exactly? I think about her journey, everything from when she died, her in those early days after the weeping, to battling those pink birds. I guess that's my answer. A sister is someone you fight with and fight for tooth and nail. And I love this quote because sisters, obviously, a very big deal in the Hunger Games universe. So they end up going down the tree. At first he wants to try and keep Welly up there, but Welly just like try it's not comfortable with being alone, which makes Welly because careers out of sight. But he goes to find Welly in the bushes. But I have to do this for a second, and like it's fine. So he leaves, and while he is trying to find stuff, he has a very hard time because like everything's wet. It's a pitcher of milk cotton that has the exact like. I just mentioned that the tree probably knows Hamish think of two options. One, and Hamish hears. I was gonna say you Coco, but like that's not accurate. So he gets very paranoid about drinking anymore because he thinks it might be poison. And Hamish comes from to know, basically it's like, I can't feed Willie a raw potato like that. Won't go in her stomach, and it's the only thing I have left. Well, because if it's poisoned, I basically kill her. I don't want to do that. So he dumps it empty. We have to go down, and I have to be able to make a fire. So that goes back to where he left Welly, and Silka standing there with Welly's head just like holding it, which is brutal. Oh my god. To make a fire. Also, fun fact that I skipped over a bit while to knock the ex out of Welly isn't awake yet. He finds out that he gifted it to him when she died, and Hamish basically comes up with the axe get thrown over the edge, which means that blow up the force field around the arena. So he also is planning to do that, but first he needs to take care of Welly and sense. Hamish then pulls himself together for his final act, which is to blow up the force field, and he does that. He does it. Leave you alone. Like the people in there has a very hard time because like, everything's wet. Stop what you're doing, please. Don't drop everything. Like spiral. Of course it does. Staircase and golden eagle perched on the lip. And I do have to wonder if this whole action, the picture is the exact inspiration behind like him wanting to blow up the force field in the 75th house, and it comes with a note. So this makes two options. One, that's Plutarch, sign of like you go boy, you go girl, but like that's not accurate. Yeah. Then next, the other option is that this is Snow's sign of like, I knew you mess with the milk. But then he's also heavily drugged because, you know, so his whole body had to be fixed. Like he was very fucked up. And there he's actually forced to stay there for a little bit in solitary confinement, which also is absolutely brutal, especially because the TV, oh my god, like he can't control it. But yeah, that's the thing. And then it says curated especially for me, gory snippets to knock the axe out of Hamish's hand, and like they're both pretty badly injured at this point, but like Hamish definitely worse than she is. And he ends up putting all the way to the edge in the interviews, and which means that it Silk at first thinks like, oh, I'm gonna win this because my injuries are way less bad than Hamish's are. Like I'm gonna survive this, I'm gonna out survive him, just for the ex to like come back and smack her dap in the head. But what we blow up the force field, and he does that. He does it. And especially so notices that when he's like doing like putting all of the pieces together, the hovercraft that is supposed to go what are you doing? Freeze, don't drop everything, because he's like, also they don't want me to blow up the force field. Like some quick calculations to blow up the force field, it's gonna do something. Blow up the force field in the 75th Hunger Games, and because they know it works because Hamish did it, so they had to think of another way to do it. But Snow also wants to hide his a part of the idea of it. I don't know. And these next couple of chapters, everybody can like see pages are a bit confusing because Hamish clips all these like in between space, there is a bit hole and gives it a depth. He did. So I also want to know that Snow also ordered the white bows, like that was Effie's decision, and that's and then eventually once he like because it is very well known to be a symbol of Snow. Like she literally taps it to say he did, as in Snow made the decision to wear the. So it's known that a white as the TV rose is no like, symbol very well. You can't I want to know it. That's a Snow order thing, just like the otherwise children is pair. So that's fucked up. But what makes me very confused like is that it also shows they show clips from, they give like a little recap for singing in the interviews. Actually, so it's about Lucy Gray that she ends up singing. It also shows at the end of her song, the girl bows and extends a hand to a figure who is standing just out of the spotlight. A silhouette of a man, upright, trim, a crown of curls. He waits a moment as if deciding whether or not to join her, then takes a step forward as the screen goes black. So that's already okay. The capital of course is in control. That isn't included in the video is why what Lucy Gray, and especially one that shows snow, like face, but like that silhouette, that's snow. Especially because Hamish does put, and even Hamish is 2 and 2 together, like he does figure out that considering Snow knows so much about the copy, that he probably is the guy. So so fuck that, which I think is interesting. And then we get into the arena where at first everything together with his white, but because to get have that separation already from him and the newcomers, victory celebration in the interviews, him just bolting Effie brings away a white rose to carry in his lapel from day 2 onward that hides his token. He just like the token to it make him seem more like an asshole, like selfish and like working on his own. And they show clips from the gives like a little recap. Hamish going and to immediately the arena, running into the careers in that, and then brutally killing him. And then the reactions of his mom and Sid also are. And then again, things changed. The video, because why would it? And then it also mentions that during the interviews they have been edited, the careers, basically in my attempts to be appeared smarter and into one big sequence that involves the ladybugs and blowtorch. One the clip that looks down on the treacherous rocks, but the steer clear of the generator. Like the little edited out part that we also saw in Fire, that's like and with it the part where Maisie says she's just going back for the potatoes. It makes them look so it looks like we really decided to split up. To my surprise, they keep the discovery of the force field. I guess they need it for Silka's death. And he sees it as an attempt. And then my delivery of milk from Snow has evaporated. As I went through the woods, they've added the sound of Welly screaming, which didn't happen. Straight away already I appear to have finally remembered that I belong to a rideable lion, so I'm going to notice differences when the cannon sounds and I come upon Silka. Where he sees himself fighting squirrels. Smash cut they weren't around till the third dripping Marie to the bone. No matter that we haven't even met up yet, so I seem to be trying to say my own life. They show Lulu gasping in the flowers, only nowhere in sight. Later I'm just running from the games that they show the audience a glimpse of me, of my fleeing with her body, and that they intentionally saved Marie on the shock as punishment. What they showed during the actual games, I don't know. That's why you can do in a recap whatever you want, but like how did they treat the squirrels as if making a second appearance switched up things? And then there was a reveal of a skeleton on the ground. Again, I'm nowhere to be found. In fact, picking the camp out the bombing of the tank, my rampage, and the arena going haywire, not a bit of that appears. Which no. And then we do have the fight between Silka and working on his own, basically the same. And then we have on the cliff, Silka corners me, throws an axe, I drop. And then brutally killing him, where he doesn't even recognize himself. Porcupine Mutt and with a mind-bending realignment of events, Maisily and me drawing off the Porcupine Mud and Marit and Maisily killing the 3 kingmakers at the berm have vanished. Somewhere in time, Marit and Silka chases through the woods, and Buck, Shakuri, and Hill die from the I guess he needed for Silka's death. Attack that goes the same as an attempt of a redemption. But then it's also revealed the camera pulls back slowly as they carry me away for the first time, revealing the arena as a whole. So no, the capital being in the form of an eye and then every single thing in it being poisonous, which is Snow's favorite way of killing people. Switched up things. That says a lot. Even when it comes President Snow gives an honor split up. I wonder how they did that. Image because of course they couldn't show it. Snow lands on top a day before and Snow ends it with "Enjoy your homecoming." And I literally wrote, "Oh fuck you" underneath that because I knew this was gonna go wrong. My camera just randomly stopped recording. So on the cliff, so basically after throws her act, we get on the cliff, so after me throws her axe, I drop. They cut to anticipation and then back to me Snow's house. This must have happened after I lost consciousness. The axe rebounds and buries itself in her head, and then Silka dies. Her cannon fires, and I'm hanging on by a thread. The sunflower bomb, the quartz, the flint striker, there's no record of any of them. All of them gone or tucked away from my sight. The hovercraft removes Silka's body, trumpets declare my victory, a clock closes around me. So they really fucked with him. And again, I wonder how in the next couple of days he's obviously there is a delay, I think, on what happens to kind of and what is shown. Celebrate his victory. Just like we already know happens during the reaping. I definitely think there was even a bigger delay during the actual games. But I don't know. But it's also like, how do the mentors perfectly time Sponges is being brought in if it's not on the actual timeline? I don't know. It confuses me how they do this while it's live broadcasting. I wish it does enough to do these recaps in a different order, and that eventually like switches things up in people's minds if they constantly see it in the same people. I mean, the second time they also it looks like a giant home, but like, amongst the pupil, the white circle of spring green meadow makes up the eye was on the other side of the dark green of the forest. They kind of immediately notice to point, like forming the whites of the eye. Well, the symbolism has been lost on no one. Even the little kids in the scene know the capital power. And honestly, the capital being clever because they put it on fire at a time where Hamish would have to see it if he came home, but also could not do anything about it because it was too late, as his mom and brother were already dead, and it is so devastating of a scene. It is absolutely brutal. In fact, they're constantly giving him sleeping potion to like calm him, and then because he just is not doing well at all. Just like in general, from the prison where she was captured at the start of the book, Hamish kind of wonders if it is, and like a lie Leonard told him to make him go into the arena have some fresh air, or if that is a lie. She ends up noticing that the peacekeepers stole Leonard off, or that they purposely kept her longer. And then as kind of she's celebrate his victory. And then it also mentions that the last party is an all-night party at the Capitol Zoo. And I literally went, oh, that's fucked, because it is. That's where they capped the tributes during the 10 games, and now they're doing victory parties over there. That's fucked up. I don't care. They're all wet gumdrops. And anyway, then he is like on the train and back to District 12 together with the coffins and bodies of the District 12 people that died, which is also fucked. And I wonder, because this is also a thing that Hamish does wonder, is if that's a thing that's only done for him to like punish him even more for what he did, or if this is a thing that's always done. The smell of burning, and he quickly, and this is where I turn on the camera burning, and like you saw my reaction to everything. Part of him is like, maybe it's not my house, but like he knows is it And it's told that he consistently dreams of and how that went down. And it is so devastating of a scene. And after that we have a scene of their funeral. And at a certain point he does want to try and find Luna Dobbs. Absolutely brutal. And but probably somewhere else, and he thinks it's in the woods. And as he's like looking for it over there, doing well at all, just like in general. And then says it's a graveyard with carved headstones, each marked only with a snippet of their name poems among them on a creamy white stone. Lady, he said, might Claire, and hit his face on a mossy slab of slate, yet some think that to this day she is a living child. That you may see sweet grey upon the lonesome wild, and the grey walk speckled pink and purple, but the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was a whisper. She says, now you're home, I guess I can eat the otters, and he goes, what otters? There's a whisper and echo murmured back to the word, no, really this and nothing more. Which, that even though these was my final confirmation, and Maud Ivory is that, which, you know, it would not the way call it, like how they described it at the start of the book. I knew Maud Ivory was gonna be Luna Dobbs' mom. Like spit them out, she was that, but like it was still brutal to see the official confirmation of it in days because she's been in prison. Burying Flint Striker at the headstone, and she says. Which also broke me. She says, do that. And then she says hoarsely, I turn my head and see the sun just peeking over the horizon. What? The sun? Don't you let it rise, she gets out. Tears choke me. I can't stop it. You know I can't stop it. Her head chokes a bit to the side on the weeping. She whispers. Oh God, Lenore's death scene is and you saw my reaction to everything because he knows that he but basically was all of it rebellious, and therefore he's being punished. He also has like this deep guilt consistently, and it is so brutal. Like I knew Haymitch's history was gonna be brutal, but like fuck me. And he breaks contact with every person he knows. Take him on the victory tour. He is of the belief that everyone he loves will wind up dead, which, you know, pretty accurate. Little room in the Justice building, he ends up sleep and Katniss too as well. In Catching Fire, when he does want to try and find Luna Dobbs. And basically, Plutarch tries to convince Haymitch to join like the rebellion, but Haymitch is like, I'm useless. Like looking for it over there. Murdoch, who is Katniss's dad, actually. There's this. Who I'm already quoting it. There's this quote in the last paragraph, basically. I'm so desperate to forget. And it takes place, actually, after the events of the trilogy. Okay, I have to pull myself together again. Of it. And then like the first time that fully broke me in the epilogue was I first saw the girl at the hop and she was just a baby. Oh God, that reference. So it's and then ultimately fucked me up. Like the sleep syrup is running out, so he ends up turning to alcohol instead. That's how he gets his alcoholism. But like, who he really is going through it. Like it kind of makes sense when he turns to alcohol, because like he has nightmares on the wazoo, like not only of Luna Dobbs dead, but and then it also says I didn't want to let them in her and Peter, but the wall was I didn't want to let them in her and Peter, but the walls of a person's heart are not unpacked. Oh, I can't read it. Basically trying to say fuck me. He didn't want to let Peter get this in, but he did. And then why I read the victory quote earlier is because of this. And here I didn't want to have anything to do with the memorial book after the war. What use, what point? To live all the loss, but when Burnok's page came up, I had to mention him showing me the grave. And I felt compelled to tell them about May's only daughter, former owner of the market-shaped mill. I can't stop crying. And I said love the stars. Before I knew it, they all came tumbling out. Family, tributes, friends, comrades, and moms, everybody. Even my love. I finally told her story. Oh God. Like you're telling me he spent like 25 years trying to forget probably even longer, and then just To escape the
These
grief,
two
the
idiots
loneliness,
come with
the
like
loss of
memorial book
those
and
everything
love.
just starts
There are
pouring
no
out of him and he
mementos
didn't
of them.
forget.
All are burned or buried. I work on forgetting their voices, their faces.
And it's also
their laughs.
eventually
Even in my
mentioned
head,
that
my
cat
language
is
becomes Dylan Flats.
not to
The
eat too
color
hard.
music of yesterday. Oh my god. And it also says Billy X had mine was the first face this Gosling saw, which also made me emotional because ooh, Image does mention that Leonardo has been with him his entire life, and he sees her like the same age as he is, and I. And then this mentioned that she starts coming alone after her dad has died, and that her hair into braids reminds me of Luella McCoy, and just oh, and that's also why he ends up like a sweetheart, because it just kind of slips out because he's just so reminded of Luella. Anyway, that brings us to this book finished, which means I can put the dust jacket on it again. Wanna let Peter get this in. Anyway, in case it wasn't obvious, but my pure and utter devastation at the end of this, 5 stars. So easy. If you want to know how the Tammy situation looked like, I mean the light is not picking it up very well, but there's a lot in here. But I never could have predicted such a good book. I mean, I love the focus on propaganda and how it works with that. I love Hamish's determination. I love his just that makes the ending so devastating. Is him having to cut off every single person, because he is a person that drives brings him goose eggs on the community, and let Peter ends up just so fucking devastating that he spent so much of his adult life basically alone because he felt like he couldn't do anything else, which also made me emotional because a novel like geese that Hamish spends a lot of time in the meadow with the geese because Leonardo likes it best there. I'm content where she's content. Julie is gorgeous. I love it. Like I said, I love Hamish as a character. And then the book ends, and this is the most devastating of all. I know one thing though, the capital can never take Leonardo from me again. They never really did in the first place. Nothing you can take from me. Like I said, 5 stars. I am gonna have to recover the most precious thing I've ever known for like a few days of this, because like there's no way I can survive. I love you like all so too. Yeah. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this book. Broke. I'm still broken. I thought I put myself together enough. I obviously haven't. My glasses maybe hopefully I will have them covered one day. I don't know. I'm gonna take them off. I don't know what will come on me. I really don't. Anyway, bye. I can put the dust jacket on it again. I'm still crying, by the way. I don't think I'm ever gonna stop. That's the point.